Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk, a new series of candid conversations covering the issues facing freelance professionals today. I'm Tom Rizzo, your host, Managing Director and founder of Plectrum Advisors, an investment advisory firm based in Los Angeles. On each episode of Let's Talk, I'll be speaking with some of the most plugged-in experts to help you and me make sense of today's changing environment and to help you be smarter about how to approach work and life. So let's get started. Many of you have already seen our first episode with Kim, in which she talked about how the fund works, what her role is, and what was new at the Film Musicians Secondary Markets Fund. That episode is archived on our website if you'd like to view it. On today's episode, we're going to specifically concentrate on new media and what new media means for musicians' residuals going forward. Well, welcome, Kim. I'm so glad you're able to join us again. I so enjoyed the last interview that we did where we covered in depth all of the things that go on at the fund and how they affect participants and how things work, nuts and bolts and that kind of thing. And I'm so glad that you agreed to come back and help us focus on some of the particular issues and see if we can go a little bit more in depth. I thought that today we might focus on new media and what it means for participants and what the future might hold and how things are going in that area. So if you're game for that, that's where I'd like to go. Before we start on new media specifically, why don't you give us just a brief overview, like we did in the last interview, of what the fund is, what it does, how it came to be, and what it is that you guys do over there.
All right. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and speak with you. And I hope shedding a little light on the Film Musicians Secondary Markets Fund is helpful for the musicians community. The fund has been around now officially for 50 years. It was 51 years. It was established in 1972. And what it does is it collects, allocates and distributes to musicians the residuals that musicians are entitled to for the distribution of films and television programs in what are called secondary markets. After it leaves the movie theater and it goes to DVD or pay television, there are residuals that the Musicians Union contract requires. We collect those residuals. We figure out what each musician is entitled to under the formulas in the union contract, and then we distribute those monies usually on July 1st of every year. That's pretty much what one of our main missions. Our second mission is to support the community, the film and television music community generally. And that work involves educational seminars, workshops to help not just musicians, but also up-and-coming filmmakers to understand how to work with professional musicians in film and television scoring. So those are the two things that occupy most of our time. We collect roughly last year $135 million on behalf of musicians. We have about 43 staff people who do the work here and make sure that those checks get out the door to the musicians who earn them.
That's great. Sounds like a daunting task, and I'm glad you gave us a little bit of an idea on how big the organization is. And a lot of us on the outside, we really don't know what all that you do. So thanks for that. So on our preparation call the other day, we talked about, we discussed what should we talk about? What are people talking about in the field? What are musicians concerned with? What are their questions? What would they like some more information on? And you and I both settled on this topic of new media and what it is and what it isn't and how it affects musicians and what the future might hold and that kind of thing. So Can you give us, from a starting place, just give us a definition of what's meant by the term new media, and then maybe go into a little bit about how projects that are either made for new media or old projects that went someplace else and now are coming into new media, how those get affected with fund collections and distributions.
Okay, thanks. Well, the irony is an example of once you give something a name, it sticks forever. New media is not new by any stretch of the imagination. It's been around in the audiovisual context as we know it pretty much since the turn of the century. The new media definitions and terms and residuals that we've become more familiar with really came about in most of the union and guild contracts starting in 2007, 2008, and in the case of the AFM in their 2010 agreement. What new media is, for purposes of the contract, is essentially digital services that allow you and I as consumers to access audiovisual content, in the case of the AFM agreement, specifically motion pictures, TV series, and other kinds of programs, to access them through the internet in some fashion. And that's whether you access it through a streaming service, we'll talk about that, whether you download it to rent for a period of time, or you download it to own so that you can watch it, let's call it the electronic version of owning a DVD. That is, generally speaking, what is meant by new media in the context of this contract. Now, these contracts. It could mean other things in other contexts, but I think for purposes of this discussion and what it means for residuals for musicians, those are really the definitions that we're talking about. So, what it also means is that you have two different situations. As you've mentioned, you have a situation where what we call product made for traditional media. So someone makes a movie that's intended to be shown at your AMC theaters, or a television program that's intended for ABC network or CBS or TBS for that matter, leaves its original platform and goes to new media. There's a whole provision in the agreement that speaks to what the residuals are in those cases. Then you have the situation of something that is made specifically for a new media platform, and that is a very different scenario that has different implications and different real world implications for residuals for musicians. So I will stop there and see if there are specific questions that you'd like me to touch on.
All right. Well, this is I think you've touched on the prime area of confusion, because if we look at we're going to show a chart a little later on in the program where you're going to break down the sources of inflows to the fund, whether they come from pay TV or getting shown on an airplane or DVD or new media. And when I looked at this chart this morning, maybe we'll put this chart up now and we'll just take a little look here. You see the area that seems like it is the largest area of growth is the red band in there, which says new media. And musicians are understandably confused because they're thinking, well, I thought that when things are going to new media, that we have either restricted or significantly lower or no residual payments. So why is this thing growing? Do I misunderstand how this thing works? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, and it's very confusing. So it is understandable that folks misunderstand how it works. Let me start by outlining the three different types of new media services that the AFM agreements speak to, because they divide them up into two major categories. So the AFM agreement makes a distinction between services that require you and I as the viewer to pay something to be able to access, or versus services that allow you and I as the viewer to watch the content for free. We have to sit through commercials, but we are able to watch it for free. The agreement breaks those into two different categories. And within the category of what's called consumer pay, you and I have to pay something to watch it. There are really two different types of concepts. One is you and I as the consumer are able to view the content through a limited period of time because we pay a subscription or rental fee. So think Amazon Prime or Netflix, and we pay whatever that monthly amount is that allows us to look at their content. The other consumer pay concept is I download something to keep. So think Apple iTunes, that if I buy a movie to keep on Apple iTunes, from Apple iTunes, that's called download to own or electronic sell-through. So in the pay category, and I'm leading to why this is confusing, okay. In the consumer pay category, the most common sources of the residuals that we're talking about come from the streaming services, so which we abbreviate as SVOD or SVOD, which stands for subscription video on demand. So think Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, all of those types of services where you pay a subscription. There is a residual that is generated when a movie or a TV show moves onto one of those platforms. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Download to own, or EST, which stands for electronic sell-through, where you can buy it to keep. And you think about Apple iTunes, Microsoft Movies or TV, but also some of the subscription services you can actually buy to keep as well. They do offer that. You contrast that with free services, which in the agreement, it is, this is a mouthful. It's called free to the consumer advertiser supported services transmitted via the internet, which thank God everybody abbreviates to AVOD, which stands for Advertiser Video on Demand. But basically, think about YouTube, Freevee, Pluto TV, and similar services where you can see it for free, but you probably have to sit through commercials. And some of the SVOD services will sometimes offer promotions for free, and that's considered AVOD when they do that as well. So what's the difference? Why are people confused? And the reason people are confused, and understandably so, is you have to go back to what is the original platform that the movie or the program originally aired on. So if a motion picture was originally intended for theatrical distribution, and its first market was it went into theaters, or a TV show, let's pick one, Grey's Anatomy, I'm just, making that up, was originally on traditional television, or The Walking Dead, which was originally on traditional old school basic cable, AMC. That's the primary market. Under the contract, it says if it moves to one of these new media platforms, whether SVOD, AVOD, or EST, there is a residual that is payable for that. By contrast, if it is made originally for new media, and examples of that are the three that I can think of, and they're all TV series: The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, or The Handmaid's Tale, which is made for Hulu, or 11/22/63, which is a series that I believe also is on Hulu. If it is made specifically originally for one of the new media platforms, and usually it's one of the subscription services, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, they're all creating their own content. The residuals are very limited. First of all, if it is something that starts out on a subscription service, there's really no additional residuals if it continues to play on that subscription service. And there are residuals if it started on that subscription service and then went to television. If it, for example, went to pay television or to DVD, there would be a residual. However, that doesn't happen that often. Yeah. If a company is making something for a subscription service, the business model is such that it doesn't make any sense to put it in DVDs. It happens, I guess maybe they are marketing, to my age group that can't figure out how to get onto a subscription service and are still doing things in DVD. But for the most part, if a company is making something originally for a streaming service, that's pretty much where it's going to stay. Mm-hmm. And if it stays there, therefore, there really is not residuals for the continued use on that streaming service, or even if it was available for download. There aren't residuals yet in the agreement. Now, what is going to happen in the future with negotiations? We don't have anything to say about that, but that's the way the contract is structured right now. Mm-hmm. The one exception that exists is if a program, and it's usually a program, is made originally to be shown on a free streaming service, an AVOD service, and then it goes to a pay service, either a subscription service or a download, then a residual would apply. And it happens, but it's relatively rare. Let me give you an example of where it happened. You may recall when I think it was still called CBS All Access, when CBS All Access was first going live. One of the ways that they wanted to attract viewers to their service was to promote the new Star Trek. I think it's Star Trek Discovery was the big flagship from the franchise. And what they did, which was smart, is they made it free. The first 3 episodes of the series were made free on the service to attract you as the viewers, because there are all us Star Trek fans out there. And then after the 3rd episode, then everything flipped to pay only. Mm-hmm. Those first 3 episodes, because they started out on a free service, the fact that they're on the subscription service now, residuals are payable. But for all the other episodes that were initially released only on the paid subscription service, there are no additional residuals for those episodes. I hope that's a lengthy answer, but I hope it clarifies where the confusion is.
No, it's good. I think the confusion also may be this point is, so if I understand you correctly, things that are being made directly for new media, something made for Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu, etc., if it's made directly from there, and if it just stays there, that there are no residual obligations for those. It seems like there's a good portion of what's going on these days in production that is that. I don't know what the percentage is. So how do you explain, if that's the case, the explosive growth in the monies that are coming into new media on the chart? We'll put the chart up again here, where you're seeing that red band looks like it's increasing, but you had just said, well, it should be decreasing because there aren't residuals for a good portion of what's going on now. So can you speak to that a little bit, Kim?
Sure. Well, first of all, there is a lot of what I'm going to call product made originally for traditional media that gets thrown onto the news media services. So many of the companies over the years have opened up the vaults. Nice. And put things that were sitting on a vault that maybe were not marketable on pay television, maybe they weren't marketable in the cassette or DVD market, but in the new media market, there's so much space for inventory that why not, if you're a company, why not put something out there and see if you can get, even if it's small, get some return on that product that's been sitting in a vault for 15, 20, 30 years. So that's number one. Number two is, and this can be really, really confusing for working musicians. A number of the companies that are making motion pictures, their model is such that they want those motion pictures to be eligible, particularly for Oscars. So what they do is they will produce them for limited theatrical release. They'll be, maybe 2 weeks in New York and LA, and then throw them onto their service. But because they started out in a theatrical venue, they are treated as theatrical. So, which means that those 2 weeks in movie theaters in Los Angeles and New York gets residuals, generates therefore residuals when those movies move over to a new media streaming service. And that is a very, very common now business model. The other thing is that there is a mutual understanding in the industry, which can be very confusing because it's not written down anywhere, but it is the understanding that everyone has been operating under. So let's rewind to 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. And if you think about it, there were a lot of scoring sessions that happened in late 2019, early 2020, for what people anticipated would be theatrical motion pictures. And so when the musicians were hired, the contract said, this is for theatrical. The pandemic hit, theaters shut down. And what the companies did was, since they couldn't put it in theaters, they put it on their new media services. So in that case, because the musicians were actually hired under session contracts that said this is for theatrical, even though the first place it showed was a new media service, it was treated as if it was originally shown in theatrical. And that is still the working understanding. Sometimes the company, when they are doing a project, they're not really sure where it's going to go, even now that things have opened up. So sometimes the contract may say, this is for theatrical. The company makes a business decision, you know what, we're going to put it on a streaming service, not send it in theatrical. The musicians still need to receive residuals as if it was originally released in theatrical. And that's sort of the general rule. So what is confusing, but musicians can ask, is when they are contracted, the contractor should know what the contractor is being told it is for. And the B7 form, the session contract, should identify what market it's for. And for many of these projects, they're actually saying it's theatrical because it could be, and just it makes it more convenient for everyone to just assume it's theatrical. And then there will be residuals down the road if that is how the musicians were engaged. Because the theory is, if the musician could have accepted maybe could have accepted another job. But if they accepted the job thinking it was theatrical, and therefore there would be residuals down the road, a back end that the musician would get, then it's only fair that that's how it'd be treated, because those musicians could have gone and done another gig if they had thought it was something else. So
Got it.
I hope that explains.
Well,
it's confusing.
Well, I think it does. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's, one of the prime things I'm hoping to get the word out here with this interview is to be able to look at all the parts, because I think there's some misinformation out there, and it is confusing, because it's difficult to parse. So just to reiterate here that the contract kind of is the gold standard. If the contract is that it's a theatrical motion picture, irregardless of what ends up happening with it, the contract is going to determine whether there are residuals attached to this.
That's correct. It will be treated based upon what has been placed on the B7 form, because that's what the musicians accepted when they came and did the work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Let's put the slide up again. I'm going to take a look at my copy of this, and let's take a look at what else is in here. So we've got, it looks like we've got 5 categories at least on the colored part. We got the new media, which we just talked about, and then we've got pay TV, DVD, free TV, and then the not specified. You want to talk a little bit about each of these here, Kim, and at least define what pay TV is and that kind of thing.
So let me start with not specified.
Okay.
Not specified is, there are some companies that when they report to us, they report in a generic form supplemental markets without breaking down what specific supplemental market it is. So we put not specified because we're not really sure, and it could be new media residuals, it could be pay TV. We just don't know. So we put not specified, and that's been, in terms of the percentage of the monies that come in each year, that's been pretty consistent. Pay TV is, if you think about, I always say, if you have to pay for it and don't watch commercials, that's pay TV. So think about HBO, Stars, Showtime. I believe Epix would also fall in that category. Those are pay TV because you get that through your television, usually your cable provider, but you have to pay something extra to be able to access HBO, Stars, Showtime, those pay TV services. Free TV is you're not really paying anything extra to get it. Now, free TV in the context of the AFM agreement includes basic cable as we know it. So if you think about, I've signed up for Spectrum, or I've signed up for Charter, whatever the service is that one has, and you sign up for basic cable so that you can get your traditional TV stations like ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, Channel 9, both the local and the network stations. But what comes with it are what we call the basic cable system. So you're not paying extra to get MSNBC, to get C-SPAN, to get AMC or TBS or TNT. They basically come with the package. And as you think about it, when I say free TV, the way to think about it is if you have to watch commercials, and if you think about it, if you're watching TBS, you've got to watch commercials. If you're watching CBS, you have to watch commercials. Think of that as free television. DVDs, pretty clear, that's DVD and Blu-ray. What you will see is on that chart, as you'll know, the pay TV ribbon, the DVD ribbon rather, the DVD ribbon has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller as a percentage of the monies that come in, both percentage and in real dollars, since the first fiscal year that's on that chart, which is fiscal year 2011. And overall, from the various services, DVDs have precipitously declined, and that's not different. Then you think about it, think about what happened in the late 1990s with CDs, when music became available through, Napster and all those, the illegal services as well as the lawful services. It's a similar dynamic that the growth in consumers accessing content through the new media services and the residuals that have flowed from that have offset the decline in residuals coming through DVDs. And that's not surprising. It's just, sort of a transition in technology that we all understand. I think the question will become down the road, at what point will the growth that you're seeing either plateau or decline? I don't have the answer to that. Or will it keep growing? And a lot of that will depend upon what's in the contract going forward, as well as what kind of content. It's, even though a lot of content is being made directly for the new media services, it's not like primetime television has gone dark. Companies are still putting content on their TV stations. Now, there is a question how much of it will be drama versus reality versus talk versus the music content shows, which fall under a different agreement. But so far, new media has been additive and has not cannibalized at this point. But where things will be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, if I had the answer to that, I would be queen of the industry.
Yes, I agree. And is there another technology coming down the line that's going to change everything? I mean, we've seen when we went, I'm old enough to remember vinyl records, CDs, and then downloads to buy, and then streaming, especially with AI coming into, prominence now, is there going to be some change that we can't even see coming? It's likely, right?
Yes.
Well, this is all really good. I'm just looking at my notes, seeing if there's something else that we haven't covered. So many of my colleagues are, working musicians that have been either working for years and years and years, or are just starting out, and so many of them depend on these residuals that the fund collects to be a rather substantial part of their livelihood. So understanding how this stuff works is, it kind of behooves everybody to really understand how it works, so you can plan and get an idea on, to the best of our ability at least, to know what's coming. Can we shift for just a second? And we covered in the last interview, we covered something that I think bears repeating. It's a little boring, but can you talk about establishing the proper beneficiary and beneficiary of beneficiaries in the fund? Because I think this gets ignored or something, and I would just like to spend a second on that.
Yes, well, it's boring but important, and under the AFM contracts, and one of the things that we administer is that when a musician passes away, his or her residuals will go to a beneficiary. And under the policies which have been established, there is an opportunity for a musician to actually name 2 generations. So the musician can name a beneficiary, and also a musician can name what's called a musician's final beneficiary. So let me use an example. If I'm a musician, I can fill out a form that says, with the fund, that says, if I should pass away, or when I pass away, I would like my husband to get all of my whatever residuals come on my account. But then I could also say, but when my husband passes away, I would like to name as my musician's final beneficiary my niece. So that when and if my husband ever passes away, the residuals will go to my niece. Now, only the musician can name their beneficiary and their musician's final beneficiary. And it's really, really important for the musician to take the time to fill out those forms. Number one, if they don't fill out the forms, then we're having to follow through and see if we can even find someone in an estate. And sometimes that's very difficult. And someone that the musician would want to receive their residuals after they pass away, it may take us a very long time to find that person. And we've had those challenges. But also, because only the musician can name a musician's final beneficiary, if the musician does not fill out the form naming a musician's final beneficiary, so in the example I just gave, if I don't fill out that form, my niece is not going to receive the residuals after my husband passes away. So I strongly urge musicians, I know paperwork is a drag, but it's important, and no one likes to think about it, but it's a really, really important I will say benefit that the AFM contract has provided for musicians to, pass down some of what they have earned to a beneficiary or a musician's final beneficiary. So please, please, please fill out the forms, and they are available on our website.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad we covered that. We counsel and help a lot of our clients to get their estate planning in order. I mean, we don't do that. We recommend estate planning attorneys to help them with that. But we found that this particular aspect of the fund is not necessarily general knowledge of many estate planning attorneys. They don't know this exists. So it's kind of incumbent on the musician or the fund beneficiary or the fund recipient to take care of this and to bring it to the attention of your estate planning person that, this exists. I have these cards, these beneficiary cards. Give them to your estate planning attorney. Make sure a copy of them are included in your trust or your will, that kind of thing. But this is not being paid attention to as much as I would like it to be paid attention to for people. So I'm glad we admonished a few folks.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you raised that, because a lot of the estate planning centers around royalties, which are under completely different rules. These residuals are governed by the union contract, and the rules are not necessarily the same. And we find sometimes we run into very sophisticated attorneys who have a hard time understanding the distinction between the two. And if they did understand it when they are creating the plan for their clients, it would make things a lot easier. So I do appreciate you raising this, because what we do here can be a little arcane for folks. And so it's always helpful to shed some light on it.
Yeah, it's it's a very small niche of people that we're the fund serves, and the general public and attorneys and that kind of thing. They just don't run into it. So this is really up to the individual participant to know that that's the case and to raise the issue. And if the attorney needs more information, well, then at least he will have the knowledge that maybe he doesn't have all the information and needs to investigate it further. So, and
it's not uncommon. I'm a perfect example of it. It's not uncommon of the family not knowing. Not every musician has an estate planner, but it's not uncommon that the family doesn't know that there is something available. And like I said, I'm a perfect example of it. My dad was a musician. He New York musician, but he did some work out here. And I didn't realize until I came to work here that there were residuals for my dad here.
Interesting. Wow.
So, and I'm a pretty knowledgeable person, so about this business. So that just goes to show you it's not easy. And I'm really glad that you raised this issue with folks.
Yeah. So at the very least, I would encourage every fund participant to at least take a minute, go to the website, and we'll put this up on the screen here, or a little bit later. We'll put it up. Just go to the website, grab the beneficiary card and the final beneficiary card, fill them out, submit them, make copies of them, include them in your estate, give them to your estate attorney, or if you have a will, make sure it exists with your will, just so that people can find and distribute the royalties that you've earned, that your heirs can be entitled to. So.
Absolutely. And I will also just always like to remind folks our toll-free number, which is 888-443-6763. Our staff is always happy to answer questions about this and other issues that musicians may have.
Well, that's great, Kim. We'll put those numbers up on the screen here if we haven't already. And I just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to help me and everybody else get a little better handle on how things work and to clear things up, especially in this new media area, which is, it took me a while to get up to speed, and I imagine that everybody else is kind of in the same boat. So I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it to us. And I encourage all those at home that are watching, if you're a fund participant, reach out to the fund. Once again, go grab your beneficiary card, make sure that that's up to date, or if you want to change it, make sure you change it if your wishes have changed. And feel free to reach out to Kim and her staff if you've got any questions. And with that, I think we'll sign off here, Kim. So thanks again for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And
thank you.
I look forward to the next time, Kim.
Well, and we look forward to having opportunities in 2023 to get more information out there. So I hope you and all the other viewers will